enough. Call the meeting to order. Is there any public comment?
Got a question. It's a why question. I've got, if you can put in your mind, a rectangular piece of property, and apparently I just had 1.1 acre, and it was before just all that ordinance was put in there. And on the, if you can picture it in your mind, on this south, there's a road goes by. I'm the only house on the road. And on the west side, there's an easement road, and I can't build anything within 7 feet of it. Okay, that's fine, no problem. Farmer needs to get his equipment down there, I understand that. On the east side, my neighbor has, there's no problem, he has some corn and stuff in there, no problem. In fact, let me preface my remarks by my relationship with all my neighbors is wonderful. I got wonderful neighbors down there. Now, on the north side, according to, now I know I have an old booklet here, but according to this, on page 23, I cannot build anything permanent within 20 feet of that property line. My question is, why? Give me a good, solid reason. I don't think I'm unreasonable. You can give me a good reason, then that's fine. But I see no good reason. In fact, right now there's, between his electric fence for the cattle and my garden, I keep about 5 feet. And he sprays down his side, and I said, well, you can put a little over my side too. I mean, we have a good relationship. He can't understand either why I can't build. I have to come 20 feet in. Now, can anybody give me a why? If you can't give me a good solid reason, it's always been done that way. Somebody who's a farmer who had 100,000 acres wanted it that way, and he had clout with the county board. That's not good enough, okay? I bought that piece of property, I owned it all, and I can see no reason why I can't build.
I'm not exactly sure how they settled on 20 feet. That's probably been in the ordinance for a long time. I'm not exactly sure where that came
now
from.
That is not good enough.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, and it's time to make a change. Now, I was told that I could get a variance, but I hope my integrity is as good as Jim Kinnate's. A variance is, I'd have to pay for that 20 feet again, right? What would be a variance amount?
$400 application fee.
How much?
$400 to apply for a variance.
Oh, how stupid are people around here to put up with that? A variance. Now, here's my definition of a variance out of the encyclopedia. The license to engage in an act contrary to a usual rule. So the usual rule is you got to come in 20 feet. And if I want to do that, I got to put a thing in 400, you say? All right. Now, here's the definition of a bribe. Something such as money or a favor offered or given to someone in a position of trust to induce him to act dishonestly. What's the difference? Can anybody tell me the difference between that? Think about it. There is no difference. Why in heaven's name, I don't care what somebody did 100 or 50 years ago, why can't I use my 20 feet of property? And I'm not going to put it up against his fence. I'm going to be 5 feet away. He don't care. Now, I know you have an ordinance that says I can't build it more than 35 feet up. I understand that. That's fair enough. But to tell me I can't use that 20 feet, give me a good, solid reason. And don't tell me about variances. Those are bribes.
I can't tell you how they came up with 20 feet. That was way before my time.
Yeah, and now I'm not, directing this at any specific individual sitting here, but you need to sometimes open this baby up and take a look at stuff. If it's got, you can't drive a horse through Village Hall. That kind of stuff's got to come out of there. And this falls into that category. I don't care who put it in there. Don't tell me I can't, I think it's unconstitutional, to tell you the truth, to tell me I can't use just because somebody way back when put it in. And I fully understand you're not aware because being a young person, you weren't around. I probably wasn't around when it was put in. But let's start looking through this thing and getting rid of some of this nonsense. And it's a bribe. There's no difference between a bribe and a variance. You cannot, the way it's written, it's the same thing. That's my thing for today.
Thank you. What was your name? I'm sorry.
Norm Pounder.
Okay.
Would you kind of look into that, please?
I'll look into it for you, and I can meet up with you after the meeting. I'll get some contact information. I'll look into it.
Thank you very much.
Any more public comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to Planning and Zoning Office report.
The report in front of you, we have August building permits. Fees are $5,701 for the month. Total receipts $5,951, which the difference would be made up in, I've got a couple of kennel license renewals and a variance application. So, we had 2 ag permits. Obviously, there's no fees related with ag permits, and then residential we had 7 for the month. Total building inspections for August was 29, and the building report is attached. Shows who got the building permits and for what they were doing. Go through those. Wagner Products is building a pretty good sized new complex out on for the bird feed. They're tearing down some existing storage and legwork and replacing it with new, about a $1.2 million project. Another home, a couple more homes. Morton Buildings. Major, couple more, good house, new houses. That's always a good thing. That's it. Plus, we have obviously next thing on the agenda. Part of my report is the variance hearing for Ed Hampton. So, this is my report. And you're obviously on the back of the first page is the claims for the inspectors.
Yeah, we'll move on to discussion and action pertaining to the request from Ed and Linda Hanson for Clifton for a variance for setback on the 800 East in Clifton.
Okay. You want me to go ahead and read it?
Yes.
Ed Hanson would like to add an addition onto an existing building on his property closer to the road than the 80 feet required setback. He is requesting a variance for the road setback from 80 feet from the center of the road to approximately 30 feet more or less. This tract is located in Section 32, Shavance Township, Township 29 North, Range 14 West of the 2nd Principal Meridian. The permanent identification number is 0332-100-003. If you look at that Google map I just gave you, this is the one in the center. The northwest road, north-south road, he's requesting the variance from. You can see the building sitting there, the existing building sitting there right now.
That's this one here?
Yeah, it's this property here. That's the building.
He
wants to build toward this road here. It's about it used to be a dirt road. Dan was no more.
Yeah, it was dirt till just a couple of years ago, I think, wasn't it? Wasn't that long ago? It was
Oh, okay.
Right.
And then the back property line is this grass right here. So he's well within the 20 feet from the rear property line, which is another earlier discussion point. But that road was 15 feet, basically about 15 feet wide now, isn't it? It's it's got some gravel on it.
Yeah, if it's that
If
wide,
it's that-
I think it might even be like 10 or 12. It's really narrow.
And I have the zoning board of appeals passed it unanimously, 6-0. And I do have a letter, a note from the Shabans Township Road Commissioner. I have met with Mr. Ed Hansen and at said property and have given my approval for his variance. And that was the only letter or comments or correspondence received on the matter. So I'll open it up to Ed, and if he wants to add any more, if he wants to, you guys have any questions for him?
I really don't know what I can say, but if you've got any questions, I'll answer them.
It's pretty basic. It's a very narrow gravel road. In fact,
It's not even a through road, a
Yeah.
mile down, it's a T. I mean, it's...
you go west, it turns back to...
So it's not used very much?
No, in fact,
It's
probably...
just basically a farmer's use it.
Probably you guys and Kevin Elliott are probably about the
Yeah.
only ones that use it.
And then Raleigh's guys.
Yeah, and Raleigh's.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
Are there no
Parkers.
easements on the road for electric or telephone? or-
no,
What's that?
no power lines or anything on that road.
No easements
The
at
power
all?
line stops at my property.
It's barren.
There's no property, power lines,
He said it was this right here.
Right, I know, I see it, but I just want to know if there's any easements.
On that particular section of road, no. But at the intersection going north, there is, but there's absolutely nothing on that road.
No, I mean, just because there's no power line there right now doesn't mean that the power company doesn't hold an easement on it. It should be recorded on the deed if there is. So, okay, then that answers the question. I mean, that's the only thing coming 30 feet from the center of the road.
Yeah.
The power company's going to be probably 35.
I mean, I personally don't see much of a problem with it either, because in 200 years, the road might be 15 feet wide. I don't anticipate it turning into a freeway anytime soon.
And the east-west road is the main,
Yeah.
it's a Clifton
Yeah.
High School road, it's the main road, the county just redid totally, all along, the whole stretch along
In fact, that short time that road was closed, that was probably the most traffic that gravel road's seen in 50 years.
I've lived on that road all 7 years of my life, and I'm 65.
Any discussion, question?
Doesn't matter to me, other than as long as there's no possibility in the future of that building that you're going to add being in the way of anything with that road. That'd be the only concern that I would have. Otherwise, no, I don't see any.
I wouldn't anticipate anything like that.
You people don't think there's that likelihood? Fine, then we can go ahead and do it, I guess. I make a motion to approve it.
Motion on the floor to approve it, seconded by Ernie Curtis. The roll call, please.
Curtis?
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes. Motion carried. We'll head to the county board on Tuesday. Be towards the end of the meeting. Your attendance isn't necessary, I don't believe, but it
Not
doesn't hurt.
required for the full county board, but obviously, for any kind of questions, recommended that you appear.
This coming Tuesday?
Coming Tuesday, meeting's at 9, but the zoning report is toward the end of the meeting, so if you're here by 9:45, you'll be in plenty of time for that report. So, if you're, like I said, it's not required, if something comes up, don't.
I'd like to be here, I want to hear the answer, but,
Yeah, fine.
and what's the odds?
You've got approval from the zoning board of appeals and the zoning committee, I don't see.
3/4 of the way there, huh?
2/3.
All right, thank you much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We're done with us then?
Yep.
Okay. Tuesday at
9 is against room, is when it starts, like I said, zoning committee reports toward the end of the meeting.
All right, thank you much.
Take care. Okay, moving on to discussion of enforcement of ordinances. Jim Devine isn't here again, but it's open for discussion. if there's any input from the committee. John, I know you got something to say.
That may be a stupid question, but who enforces it?
That's my only, I mean,
These
obviously.
people here?
No, well, they would obviously be part of that process, because if they see a violation, they would have to report it in writing, and then we would have to investigate it, and then, obviously, stopping construction, which they have the authority to do, is your main authority, you know.
Well, this Mr. Brown here, he's construction.
Right, he's your main, as far as he could stop construction, he could red tag it. All three of them could red tag whatever
And then come back and tell you what's wrong?
to come back and tell us what's wrong and stop construction. Having, you know, it doesn't happen very often, but that it does happen. But as far as other ordinances, you know, there's really no fine process for not getting a building permit and building anyway, which happens. Not very often. It used to happen more regularly than it does now. It's more, you know, builders won't build without a permit anymore, but if somebody does something on their own, it can happen. I don't see anything, you know, but then it requires time, money, effort to enforce that, and nothing saying that, you know, I believe Kankakee got a pretty extensive fine system set up. I could find out what that is, but they have 7 or 8 full-time, well, I don't know if they did anymore, but they did at one time, and they were out all the time, and they were enforcing everything pretty strictly, but they had manpower to do it. We don't have that. So it's just, you know, something to discuss or think about.
I think it would be helpful to find out what Kankakee County has, and maybe even a couple of other neighboring counties as well, if that's possible. But I think one of the primary purposes of the fining process is to cover any extra costs that we have in administering those situations. If the inspector has to go back an additional time, if there's any administrative work here in the office, I mean, that should be the first concern with the fines, and then beyond that would be anything of a punitive nature or discourage that kind of activity. So, but to know what other counties are doing would be, I think, very helpful for us in that respect. But I think it's...
Well, if I was building a house and they red tagged it, then I continue to do it, what would you do?
You would have to file a complaint with the state attorney, and they would have to put a cease and desist order on the property, so that's in place.
I know one thing...
If you wanted to go that far, I've known, talking to Bates a few times, I've known him to not give approval, and the person went ahead and built anyway. So it was in the file that if there was any kind of an issue down the road, the county would not be liable if they did not approve. Now, if that's something, I don't, if you want to change that too, that's, you know, because,
If we have ordinances, I think that's the thing we've talked about. We have to have a means of enforcing them, otherwise they're useless. People will ignore them. I know, and Ernie can vouch for this, at our judicial meeting on Wednesday, Judge Oswald indicated his patience is wearing thin with some of the abuses that are occurring in his area. He's got the jail pretty much full to capacity right now, mainly because of that. I mean, this doesn't have necessarily anything to do with our ordinances, but it has to do with people's disregard of laws and their conduct accordingly. So I think it's reasonable to expect that if that kind of behavior exists there, it carries over into the things that we're concerned with. And so
Well, I would think that if you red tag the house, and Mr. Brown has to come back again, that he should get paid to it.
well, he does.
Oh, does he?
It's a per diem and mileage for every kind of time he's in his car.
Well, the owner of the house should pay it.
Well, that's not in, I don't think that's...
That's what I said a minute ago, a fine has to, first
Yeah.
purpose of the fine is to cover
The county
any
shouldn't
extra
have to
costs
pay
that
it
we
because he
have.
didn't do it right.
I don't disagree with that. That's stuff we need to look at.
And we have that type of provision in the health department. For example, if Terry Hyman has to go to a restaurant a second time to inspect because he found violations the first time, they have to pay an additional cost for that reinspection. And they can't operate that restaurant without
Right.
a permit from the health department.
Right.
So there's some things we can perhaps learn from that process that, if they can apply here, it might be things for us to think about.
Any further discussions? Okay. We'll move on to Regional Planning Commission. Again, we're back to where we were. Jim Devine's not here, but the committee is willing to move on, or whatever the committee wants to do with it. We can do whatever you guys want to do. Jim Devine's original opinion was to change, was to keep in Regional Planning Commission in the subdivision ordinance. So, if you guys wanted to do that or table it again, I think it seems like with each passing meeting, our likelihood of getting a mirror is...
Well, as I mentioned to you before, he told me last night that he had emailed that stuff, but apparently if you haven't gotten it, there's some problem there.
I didn't get it. I just checked it again 10 minutes ago. It wasn't there.
Well, I understand, and it wouldn't, he's got juvenile court this morning, so it wouldn't be coming through now anyway. But my thinking on that is simply that if there's no need for a regional planning commission, if that function is either performed by this committee or should be performed or can be performed, why do we need to have an extra body involved? Now, if there's a reason for it, if the law requires it, or if there's ample activity that justifies it, then I think that's fine. But if that's not the case, I don't see where it should be included in our ordinance, because I think it's confusing and certainly, talks of a process that doesn't exist. So, unless somebody can show us that it's needed, I would be in favor of doing away with it. But I think we need to find out from Devine and anyone else that...
He thought there was something in state statute that said we were not allowed to do away with it, but he couldn't cite it offhand.
And that's what I think we need to...
That's what he was supposed to be researching for us.
Before we go ahead and do anything, I think that's what we need to know.
Well, whether they have it or not have it, but I do know, my opinion wise, it was misused when we had it.
Yeah, it needs to...
It was used for it would have been used for a variance. You don't need regional planning commission to discuss a variance.
Right.
Their job is to discuss development of industrial parks, subdivisions in the rural area and stuff like that, expansion, major expansion. And obviously we haven't had any of that.
Right.
I think the last major thing we had that probably that would have been, they could have been a part of the discussion. The two things was the fertilizer plant that got built in Gilman, and then the ethanol plant that didn't get built between Waitega and Crescent. Those the last two things I can think of that were big enough to even justify having, any kind of discussion with regional planning. But
And would that have been to take a load away from this committee? I mean, would this committee not be able to...
process too. Because it would have been a four-step process instead of a three-step process. The regional planning was always the first committee to hear anything.
Right.
And then it went to the zoning board of appeals, then to the committee, then to the county board.
And now it comes to the committee and then zoning board of
No, it goes
appeals.
zoning board of appeals first, then the committee, then the county board. You're always you're in the middle of the process now.
Okay. We're just in the beginning on things like amendments to the ordinances and so forth.
Well, that stuff, you propose changes to the ordinances first, and then you go to then it goes to the zoning board of appeals. That's the only time it reverses itself.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, even if you wanted a four-step process, I personally don't see why this committee couldn't be the initial step on that instead of a regional planning commission. But here again, I think we need to know. what the law says and then decide what it is, how it is we want to do it as a board, because no matter how you look at it, it's in essence, it's a function of the county board. And so it's just a matter of deciding how we want to establish that, I would think, so.
Now, hopefully we can get an answer from him. I'll keep on him. Maybe I could set up a meeting with him next week or something, but he can hopefully find the state statute that says we gotta have it and we can finally move on from it.
Well, I'm gonna see him sometime this afternoon.
Yeah, see if he can find it,
I mean,
and have him
I
send
can-
me that email.
I can, I mean, if you're still around, if you want to go over there with me, that's fine.
Might be. Leave that lay another month, and hopefully we'll get an answer from Jim. Subdivision ordinance revisions. Same thing.
That's part of that
Yeah.
subdivision ordinance. Is that what
We'll leave that lay as well. There's a discussion on the changes to the nuisance ordinance. Has everybody had a chance to review it, or?
I can't find a copy of it. I don't have a copy of the ordinance. I don't know if I ever got one or not, but I don't have one in my
Here's one.
Maybe that's because I'm a nuisance.
Well, explain these.
Well,
By
basic-
radio real loud, or?
Yeah, that could be if somebody files a complaint with the sheriff's department, or, I mean, obviously, if it's within the village, it's the city issue, it's not a county issue.
Don't keep my property clean?
Well, that can be, but there's nothing, if you read it, it's made,
I don't have
it's,
one.
well, yeah, I can get you one, Ernie, but it's mainly to deal with criminal activity.
I don't think I got one either.
If you read the ordinance, it's got more to do with criminal activity or, being really disruptive to your neighbors. It doesn't talk about junk cars in the yard. Could you consider that a nuisance? Yeah. But it doesn't specifically talk about that within that ordinance. And as far as, and the layers to get to somewhere, to get to the court system is pretty expensive, and I have to have pretty extensive paper trail through the sheriff's department.
Yeah, these are all criminal.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know if that's even something that we should have anything to do with as far as establishing. Maybe that's something that the state's attorney and those should have, or maybe the judicial committee, I don't know, but I mean, I
I
don't
mean, that's where I got back a couple months ago stating that I think originally the zoning office got way too involved with complaints because there was no way to enforce anything unless it was a criminal act. As far as cars in the in the yard, that kind of thing. Yeah, it looks ugly, it's terrible, but there's nothing to enforce.
No, I think we'd have to have either like a separate article or chapter or whatever in this, or a separate ordinance to cover it like you're talking
I
about.
think so too.
How-
Gilman's got
We got those abandoned houses and other things that we talked about before that in essence could be classified as nuisances or, whatever you want to call it, but we don't have any way of dealing with those largely because we don't have any money to take control of them or not tear them down. or
In
whatever.
some cases, you don't take the liability on it.
and there's always ways around things. Gilman's got a control officer, ordinance control officer, and 3 days a week, he drives the alleys and all that to see that it is clean. But the mayor says, I've got 3 or 4 that all they do is go out and put a fence up around it. So there's always ways around anything you try to do. But it does, the whole town does look cleaner than what it did, I'll say that for you. And there's some people, you're not going to change them, I don't care what you do. Put them in jail, they're still not going to clean up their property or anything.
Well, I would say, looking at this, we ought to, before we do anything with it, we ought to maybe find out from the state's attorney if we have any jurisdiction over it.
Be a good idea.
I would question that right away, but it's something for us to stay away from.
If I were me. So I've been, and when it came down to health or safety issue, I would refer them to the health department anyway, because Terry is the environmental, and he has a lot more authority and pull or whatever, pull's not the right word, but more authority than I do. I don't have anything to hold my hat on. And I think that...
Well, and he's limited too, though, because...
Yeah, he is.
And that's
Got to be
something
health and
else.
safety. He's got to make sure it's a clear health and safety issue.
But then, even then,
And John Cars doesn't classify as a health and safety issue. It just doesn't.
it gets back to discussion on enforcement of ordinances, that he's handicapped quite a bit with that also.
Can't help but feel everything we discuss is just a never-ending circle. We never get anywhere on anything.
Well, I think if
I
we're gonna
agree,
get anywhere, somebody's gonna have to put their foot forward and say, this is what we're gonna do, and live with it and stick to it and enforce it. But otherwise,
If you're within the law.
Yeah.
right, but I mean,
Then you gotta have Jim
it's
Devine
like,
to
it's
tell you
like,
what the law is.
I hate to say, it's like these people putting up pole barns and then building a house inside of them, but there apparently must be quite a few people in the county doing that we shouldn't talk about it, but...
Actually, the last two building permits I took where actually people are up front and they said that the building quarters inside and then gave me the cost of it, the square footage, and they paid for it on permit.
Well, we discussed that
Because
before.
Morton buildings won't do it anymore without, if they know they're going to be putting in a living area, they require that the customer let us know. So that's been...
And I like that, I think that's a step forward, but we still have others who...
Well, yeah, people that build their pole buildings and then 2 years later go in and fix up put an office in and insulate it, heat it with a shop and that kind of stuff. And that's, you can't, there's not enough man hours to police all that.
Well, and it's like you said, if you're up front with it and honest about it, but do it and then sneak it in there to avoid taxes or whatever.
And then, on situations like that, when you find stuff like that put in restrooms and living area, that's where Terry can have a lot of authority. They're tapping into the septic, and then he can shut it down in a hurry or make them put in a new septic. So.
Well, move on from that, and I'll talk to Jim Devine about it. We'll move on to kennel ordinance discussions. Everybody's got a copy of kennel ordinance. Were you able to go through any old papers and figure out how they settled on 4 dogs?
No, I could find it.
Number just pulled out
It
of
could
thin
be in
air?
storage somewhere.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Is that something, again, that we might be able to get some assistance by seeing what other counties have in that respect? But I guess I would like to see whatever number we arrive at to be a number that does have some significance and not something that you just pull out of the air. This was revised in November of 2009, so it's almost 6 years old. So, there certainly is a trend these days for people to have more dogs, but I don't know in the last 6 years that it's increased that much. But I can honestly say if I was 15 or 20 years younger, I'd probably want to have more than 4. And I probably wouldn't want to have a kennel license or whatnot either. I mean, I don't, what I'd be doing is involve that. And for me, it would be a situation where when I'm competing with my dogs, I might only be competing with 2 or 3 at a time, but then when they get older, just to say I'd have to kill them.
Or get an ordinance for a kennel license. Yeah.
Right. And it just, I
And that's,
think...
the number of dogs, I would think, is something that can be discussed, changed.
Well, and obviously for myself,
at the-
it shouldn't be tailored for myself. It
No,
should be
but
for everybody.
if it's, if you think there's a public outcry or wanting, I mean, that's where we're like, you know, like a veterinarian could probably give you a pretty good idea of you know, what normal families, how many dogs can a normal family handle without having a major problem on their hands or a major expense.
But I think I'm the only person in this county that does what I do, but then there may likely be people in this county that show dogs in bench trials for American Kennel Club and so forth. I don't know that there are, but there well could be. And if that's the case, they could very easily have 4 or more dogs. But again, they're not. If this was intended to keep puppy mills out of the county, then that's an entirely different matter, I think. Somebody that, like myself, is not supplying dogs to a puppy as a puppy mill, and I don't think somebody that's showing their dog in something like AKC bench trials would be doing that either. So whether there could be some special category for something like that, I don't know. I don't know if there's a need for it. Like I said, at my age, I'm downsizing. I got 4 dogs right now, and one of them will probably be gone in a year or two. He's 12 years old now. And he's, getting near the end of the trail. So when he's gone, I won't be getting another one to replace him. I guess the other concern that I had with this ordinance is what types of animals are we talking about? I mean, it obviously focuses quite a bit on dogs, but I believe there's some mention in here about other animals, and if there isn't, one wonders why there shouldn't be. About cats, snakes, birds, flamingos, what have you. We have don't have it in here, but we have controls over livestock. You have to have.
Well, yeah, depending on your zoning and your acreage.
Right.
There's
so many head per acre, and that's fine. I don't have I think that's good. But how many chickens can you have? When you have a chicken coop, is that similar to a kennel? I'm just asking questions. I guess we don't have anything in here about, well, we do have a little bit. It's just dogs, cats, and other animals. I don't know. I guess it would be helpful if we knew what some of the other counties had in this respect. If they do cover animals other than dogs, like cats, birds.
I don't think you'll find much on cats, but you may find something on exotic birds and snakes.
Yeah.
Well, I've got about 4 or 5 of these books, different books, over there, and I know Kankakee County is a lot different than Iroquois County, but I wonder if we could get their complete everything, subdivision, everything.
Well, you can, most of them have all their ordinances on PDF format online, so you just gotta go to their website, and that's how I'll research originally before I make phone calls, because a lot of that stuff's available on their county websites in PDF format. So I'll do that at first and then see what they've got.
I've had a few people asking me about, whether we have it here, mostly in reference to our wind ordinance.
You mean on the website? Yeah, I don't know if our one right now is capable of handling that kind of.
I don't think it is.
But when we convert to GIS, I would assume the website's going to have to have more capacity, so that you'll probably be able to expand what we can offer on our website. So
I just told them to contact the zoning office.
it's easy to print out and send out.
Right.
And I can scan them in and then PDF them, even if you're using an email address. I've done it a couple times. It's real simple to do. It's just it'd be nice to have it eventually online so they can just do it themselves.
I think that's a good place to start. See what some other counties have in relationship to number of animals and what animals are covered under the ordinance.
I think from what I've seen here, the number of animals is the
Yeah.
biggest question mark, and I don't know if we have people in the county that have more than 4 dogs that don't bother to
Oh, yes.
register them.
Oh, yeah.
And
I'm sure we do.
do those dogs not get rabies and other types of shots that you would normally get from a vet? I mean, the vet's required
To report.
to
yes.
report it when you get those shots.
Well, I think, I'm guessing, but I'm thinking that once you go to the vet the first time, he knows it, because my son don't always get his, and he gets a pretty bad letter to bring his
Oh,
in.
you got one. Because you didn't report the one dog passed away.
Okay.
And they thought you had 5 dogs. Because the vet made a report that you had another dog
Yeah.
back.
And I had some puppies, they were just getting to the age where they needed to be reported, so it was kind of too.
That's our, you know, when you use the vet, we, as part of the dog still, the information flows pretty good.
Yeah, that's what I
to
was
the
thinking,
office.
because if he had never went there,
Well, it's possible, it depends on the expertise of the individual, it's possible to get a hold of the rabies serum and do it yourself.
No.
I'd say the vast majority of people in violation are doing that.
Well, I mean, I don't know, you know, the incident of rabies in this day and age isn't like what it used to be many years ago either, but doesn't mean that, especially with the wild animals, skunks and raccoons and that isn't in existence and isn't something a dog can get.
Well, we'll find that out for us, put it back on the agenda next meeting. In the meantime, everybody else can read through it in the next month. I'll put it back on next month, and we'll have further discussion on it. There's no further input. Any more input on it?
I think that's a good idea. I've had an awful busy month and haven't really
Yeah, me
had a
too.
chance to prepare for it the way I'd like to. So.
Same here. Everybody had a chance to review the claims?
Yes.
Is there a motion to approve the claims? Moved by Ernest Curtis. Is there a second? Seconded by John Kerr. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the roll.
Curtis.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Raymond.
Yes. Any old business? Any new business? No new business?
We adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, is there a second? Seconded by Ernest Curtis. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same